Let's talk to Shankar Singham, CEO of Competir, former advisor to the US Trade Representative and the UK Trade Secretary as well. Shankar, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good to talk to you. What do you make of this deal? I mean, it's great that the deal has been done. I think we could all say that's a good thing. But it's not quite as sold by Keir Starmer, is it?
Well, I mean, aside from the comments that Theo made about the sort of chaos of this, but I mean that is an element of getting all of this across the line in I think barely just over a month from the announcement of the Liberation Day tariffs from President Trump. So this is moving at a speed that is completely unknown in trade negotiations. So we do need to sort of say that.
Well, they sometimes take years, don't they?
Well, most of the time, to get a deal done as the UK did with India in 3 years is lightning fast. I mean, that is lightning fast. So to do a deal in a month is extraordinary.
Yeah.
Now, let's be clear, though, that this is a framework agreement. It's what they're calling a US-UK economic prosperity deal. It's a framework that contains certain things that have been agreed, and it's important not to underestimate the things that have been agreed. So, for example, the UK gets 13,000 metric tons of beef access into the US market, duty-free. The US goes from the UK has had, because of its European tariffs, very high tariffs on agriculture. 1,000 metric tons of beef for your viewers and listeners is tiny. It's nothing basically, and that was at 20%. It's now 0% for 13,000 tons.
Right.
It's not even 13,000 tons of beef is not a lot of beef, but it is a significant change, and that has been locked in. There's substantial tariff reductions in various sectors that have been agreed. But what's most interesting, I think, is what they are going to be negotiating now. So the way to look at this deal is it is as the US Trade Representative has now made clear, this is the beginning of a negotiation. This is a framework, and they're going to be negotiating things like within steel and aluminium, where we've succeeded in lowering those tariffs from 25 to 0, provided that we have a steel and aluminium joint production, essentially. It's almost, and the economic security piece of this is a joint defense production area between the US and the UK, and that's very, very interesting. And the UK may be the only country able to do that because of its defense and intelligence sharing partnership with the US.
Right.
So
we can also only do it if we continue to make steel in the blast furnace in Scunthorpe, presumably.
Well, not only can we only do it if we make steel that can be part of that supply chain. But also, what's very clear is we've aligned through this deal with the US's approach to China. So if our production of steel includes Chinese, and this extends, by the way, to production facilities. So if the Chinese own the production facility, that will not be part of this deal.
Yeah.
So what the UK and the US have essentially agreed is that we will have a common approach to countries like China that are massive distorters of their market in steel, and aluminium, and other things, and that those Chinese distortions have caused massive problems for both the US and UK domestic manufacturing industries, and they're now sort of aligned on how they're going to deal with that. So there's a lot in this framework agreement that if those things that have been discussed as being part of the framework agreement become the actual deal, when the deal actually comes, that's a very big deal.
Yeah,
I mean,
no, for sure. I mean, the Telegraph's got a version of what you've just said, saying that Donald Trump's been handed a veto, effectively, on Chinese investment in Britain, because not only where it refers to steel, it also refers to pharmaceutical goods as well, where it says that basically the White House wants assurances that any steel and pharmaceutical product exported to the US do not originate in China. So, I mean, is that in a way giving away part of our UK sovereignty to make those decisions?
Well, I mean, I think what the US has been saying consistently for many decades, actually now, really, since China's WTO accession is, and in fact we've been saying it too, and so is the EU and the Japanese, that China is a massive distorter of its market.
Yeah.
It engages in predatory activity, it engages in distortionary activity that has caused, I mean, the reason that we had these steel closures in Port Talbot and Scunthorpe and previous to that Redcar was because of China overproduction. And what's really interesting is that now the US has this huge tariff on China, the Chinese are having to absorb their own excess production, which is causing deflationary pressure in China. Now, if China and the US agree a deal, as Secretary of the Treasury Scott Bessent is over in Switzerland on Saturday negotiating, starting the process with the Chinese. If that leads to a deal which reduces distortions, then I think we can see this framework operating slightly differently. But I think the US is going to be very firm with countries on ensuring that their approach to China and China distortions is mirrored by the US approach. So it isn't because it's China and we don't like China. It's because China is a massive distorter of its market, and someone has to do something about that.
And in terms of China's reaction to this, we've seen them before threatening all manner of tariffs on American goods going into China. I think President Xi's in Moscow today celebrating with Vladimir Putin Russia's particular military escapades. What are China likely to do to react to this?
Well, there's a limit on what they can do. So if you recall, when the US put the huge tariff on China, China retaliated itself with large tariffs, but then proceeded almost immediately to grant a series of exemptions in those tariffs because they couldn't actually survive without some of the US products that they were buying. Now, clearly, it is bad for American agriculture to have these tariffs that the Chinese have imposed. It locks American agriculture out of the Chinese market. That's a very important market for them. And that's one of the reasons why the Secretary of Agriculture is in the UK and is traveling around the world trying to sell, American agriculture to other countries and gain market access in other countries. And I think that's why there will be pressure on the UK, notwithstanding the fact that they've agreed that the UK can maintain its SPS rules. I think they will have a very different view if the UK dynamically aligns to the EU's SPS rules. Right. So I think because this is an ongoing negotiation, right? This deal has not closed. Yeah. The beginning of a negotiation, and if the first thing the UK does in the beginning of this negotiation is to dynamically align to EU regulation, that is not going to bode very well. No. For this agreement. And your point that you made earlier on, of course, none of this would have been possible without the UK leaving the EU and without Brexit. The India deal that the UK just signed would not have been possible without without Brexit. So, in a sense, from a UK perspective, you've got first accession country to the CPTPP, first major country to do a deal of any serious kind with India, and first on the starting blocks for the economic prosperity deal with the US. Reduction of the steel and aluminium tariff, reduction of the car tariff. I mean, we sold 102,000 vehicles to the US last year. We've now got a commitment that 100,000 come in at 10%, not at 27.5. So these are not small things. Yeah. And all of those things are possible for one reason and one reason alone, and that's that we're not members of the European Union.
Yeah, thank goodness for that.
So we should be very careful not to do anything that complicates that.
Yes. No, I think it's a very smart move by Trump, actually, to kind of guarantee that as well. Shankar, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Shankar Singham there, explaining, as the CEO of Competir and former advisor to US trade representatives and the UK trade secretaries, that basically Donald Trump has kind of spanked Keir Starmer and said to him, look, here's what you're going to do with China, here's what you're going to do with the EU. And if you don't do those things, we will not actually do deals with you. We will cancel this deal altogether. So it's actually a lot better for those of us who think that leaving the European Union was a good idea. So Donald Trump has not only secured a very good deal for the United States of America, but he's basically done a good deal for those of us who think that the European Union is a bad thing, quite simply.